Hello Leeds, my name is Hazel Mullisham and this is the Light on Leeds podcast where we shine our light across the city of Leeds to find amazing people doing brilliant things. And this week's guest is no exception. Her name is Maria Spadafora. She is the Senior Programmes Officer at Leeds Community Foundation. We have a fantastic chat about the difficult times that we're living in. We try not to get too pessimistic and I think we pretty much round up on a really optimistic note. But the work that those people are doing is fantastic. I think you'll find it really interesting. And Maria is a great guest, so enjoy. On this episode of the Light on Leeds podcast, I have Maria Spadafora come to speak to me. Hello, Maria.
Hey, Hazel, you all right?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for talking to me. Maria, you are the Senior Programmes Officer at Leeds Community Foundation. For people who don't know, can you just describe what it is that Leeds Community Foundation does?
Yeah, so Leeds Community Foundation, we're a registered charity, obviously based in Leeds, although we cover Bradford as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we essentially distribute grants and support to community organisations, sometimes further afield as well. And that's basically a combination of philanthropic giving, so donations and so on, legacies that have been shared with us that we can then distribute to organisations alongside statutory funding sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And what's the difference, statutory funding? Where does that come from?
Well, statutory funding, for example, will be something like Leeds City Council. So we have a couple of, probably 2 or 3 programmes that we run where Leeds City Council give us funding that we distribute on their behalf.
Okay.
So things like lunch club support, healthy holidays, activities, things like that.
Oh, fantastic. And so do organisations get in touch with you and apply for this funding via you?
Yeah, so basically what happens is we launch a programme. We tend to call them programmes. Some people will refer to them as grants or grant opportunities, and people can apply through our website. Each programme that we have tends to vary, so it might have different criteria, different areas of focus. So we might have funds, for example, that are focused purely on work with young people or work with older people. So it's about checking that your organisation and whatever it is you want to do fits the parameters of that particular fund first before you apply. But yeah, then it's a case of completing an application form and submitting that before the deadline. And we try to be really relational. We're a very busy team, but we do our best to kind of like answer queries and take phone calls and kind of support people as best we can with that process, because applying for funding is a bit of a treadmill. A lot of us in our team, we've been on that treadmill ourselves before in different roles and can appreciate what that's like for organisations, how time consuming it is, how it can be a bit of a stretch for a lot of organisations. So we do what we can to be as supportive as possible around that.
Fantastic. So you must get people from sort of small organisations to bigger ones, and it's great that you're able to give them sort of advice, because I've had a little go myself at applying for funding for things, and it's not the most simple process.
Yeah, and they all vary as well. So if you're applying to a bunch of different funders, you're going to have different forms, different requirements. Some are much more kind of rigid than others. So yeah, it is quite variable. So I realise it can be really challenging for people as well.
And are you amazed at some of the things that are put forward? Do you get great enjoyment out of seeing people's ideas?
Yeah, that's the payoff. That definitely is the payoff in our role, is when we actually particularly when we get to visit groups as well and get to kind of see either work in action or what's been done with a grant. So it varies so much, Hazel. So like I say, we've got all these different programmes. Sometimes the grant can be quite a small amount. It might be a few £100s. Sometimes it might be a bit more substantial. It might be 30 grand over 2 or 3 years. And the things these community organisations do with that funding varies enormously, but it's so essential into basically keeping keeping our communities going and keeping them
Yeah.
supported, doing a wide range of things, whether it's that really essential stuff like around kind of food and heating and so on, or whether it's about that more enriching stuff like creative activities and I don't know, kind of green activities, community gardens, lovely things like that. It really varies.
So how do you, when you sort of looking ahead, because I was looking at your website, I can see that you're partway through a 5-year plan. When you're looking at kind of the landscape of Leeds and Bradford, how do you identify which groups need to have the next the next funding or program?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on there. So we do try really hard to respond to need as best we can. But as you can imagine, we're coming into like the 5th year of that 5-year plan. And when you kind of look back to when that plan was initially envisioned,
Yeah.
and our kind of the focus that we kind of identified were things like health and well-being, kind of strengthening communities, things like that. Obviously, what's happened in that time is, well, first of all,
Yeah.
COVID-19, complete curveball there.
Yeah.
And of course, now what's generally referred to as the cost of living crisis.
Hmm.
So, whatever kind of needs and everything we identified at the beginning of that particular 5-year journey, they've obviously changed very
Yeah,
recently.
hugely.
And a lot of the kind of need that was initially kind of outlined and the things we wanted to support, a lot of those kind of issues, so obvious things like poverty, child poverty, oh gosh, just basic needs being met, they've
Yeah.
all been massively exacerbated. There were already issues, completely different picture now. And yeah, the landscape's completely changed. And it is a really worrying time. It's a worrying time for a lot of people. So yeah, I don't even know if I've answered your question there.
Well, you kind of have, because this is the thing, isn't it? Like you said, you can set out with a 5-year plan, but nobody saw what was coming in the last few years,
No,
did
of
they?
course not. It's really,
And were you able to respond quite quickly? For example, when lockdown happened, I imagine that the needs of people changed.
yeah, it's really interesting. And I wasn't on the team back then, so it's really interesting kind of hearing about how that worked and the kind of really fast turnaround of that. There was obviously a lot of government support that was trickled down through lots of different brokers, for want of a better word, to
Mhm.
help distribute that funding. And we were part of that network. And I know that for our team, it was incredibly busy and stressful. And they worked really, really hard to make sure a lot of that extra kind of funding and support got out there to communities in Leeds and Bradford. And yeah, really, really tricky time. But yeah, new challenges now. For
Exactly, and
everyone.
then you sort of, well, it's really strange, isn't it? Because it didn't feel like there was kind of a definite end to that period. It's sort of, we sort of morphed kind of slowly into back to what I hesitate to call normality.
Yeah.
And then straight from that into kind of the energy crisis and the price of living.
Oh.
It's just seemed like you must have felt like you've all been pushed from pillar to post.
A little bit, yeah. It's bonkers at the minute. It's like I don't even have the language for it.
No,
It's
it's awful.
so challenging. And yeah, and I think uh, we are kind of like putting out fires and
Yeah,
juggling all sorts of balls as best we can at the moment, aren't we? All of us in
yeah.
lots of different ways, and particularly, obviously individuals, but also community organisations. They're really struggling. Something we've done quite recently, which I've not been directly involved in. So I'm kind of going on feedback from colleagues here. But something we've done quite recently is set up a bit of a focus group. So we can do that kind of in person, let's get together with lots of kind of different representatives from different kind of areas, demographics, regions, and types of organisation in Leeds.
Yeah.
Have those conversations, what is the need at the moment, what things, what are the issues you're facing, and the sort of things like, we'd predicted our bills would go up by this much, and actually they've gone up by this much, and where
Yeah.
are we going to find that extra X number of thousands of pounds each year just to pay the electric bill? It's absolutely shocking, and I don't have answers because
No.
it's a really hard time, and
And we can't see the end of it, can we? It's not like we can say, oh, we'll only have to put up with this for another year or
yeah,
whatever. We've none of us have any idea of that.
yeah, and I think the reality is a lot of organisation, we've heard it a lot in the news and stuff, haven't we, about business, that business voice is coming through, isn't it? So we're,
Yeah.
we're hearing like theatres and pubs and so on kind of saying, we're struggling to stay open, and,
Yeah.
we might have to like reconfigure what we do, or maybe even consider folding. And some smaller businesses have already closed, haven't they? And
Yeah.
same for the third sector. So,
Mm.
a lot of voluntary and community organisations are having the same issues. I've like spoken to food banks, for example, who operate on a 4-week basis, essentially. They know they can keep going for the next 4 weeks, but don't necessarily know if they can keep going beyond that, because the other thing that's happened is we're giving less to charity because we're all skint.
Yeah.
So obviously those donations to charity sector at lots of different levels have dropped as well. So it's really worrying. So reports are saying that an estimated 10.7 billion was donated in 2021 compared to 11.3 billion in 2020.
Wow.
And that's even with the fact that a lot of people have given to the Ukraine crisis, which caused a bit of a spike in donations. So that figure for 2022 and 2023, because of cost of living, is going to be interesting to see, isn't it?
It is, and it's it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
this is the time of all times when the people who use charities and the support that charities give, we need that the most.
yeah, yeah. We're in a very difficult time, and of course, our country is so dependent on the voluntary and community sector.
Yeah.
Those organisations and individuals who are all about purpose rather than profit, and are all about good social connection and impact and giving back to our communities and advocating for them. It's a big part of how our infrastructure, and if that infrastructure starts to fall apart, I don't know where we're going to stand, because we've already had 12 years of austerity,
I
which
know.
people don't really talk about anymore. And it's still
No.
very much embedded in our benefits system and in council funding and so on and so forth, even in our VAT and things that we pay. So we've had COVID and now cost of living on top of that, and it's we only have to look at the news, don't we, to
Yeah.
see all of these issues that are coming out of that, and it's pretty horrendous. And for Leeds in particular, I went to a public health event last year, before the real cuts kicked in as well. So before the energy bills and everything had really shot up, and it was really interesting to see that, even just those visuals, those graphs that chart life expectancy, for example. Before 2010, it was going up. Like, child poverty was decreasing, life expectancy was increasing in Leeds. And then from 2010 onwards, it's all downhill.
Oh
So,
gosh.
so life expectancy has dropped, particularly in, the less affluent areas. So you think like, I don't know, like Hare Hills, Beeston, Chapeltown, compared to the more affluent areas like, I don't know, Alwoodley, Wetherby. It's really interesting the stark difference in life expectancy in those areas in Leeds, um, and the same with child poverty. It's horrendous. Gosh, I
Like you
could
say,
come on
that
here and I'm just like, oh my god, negative, but it's so
well,
difficult.
it's difficult, isn't it? Because I mean, obviously, you're involved in something that's so positive,
Say
but
again, sorry, I missed that.
you're involved in something that is so positive, but
Yeah,
still, you've got to be realistic, and there's no point kind of painting a happy picture over something that there's no denying it. We're in a really, really difficult time,
yeah, yeah.
and
And
a lot
I
of people are
think,
really
yeah,
feeling it.
yeah, and it oh god, I could get really political here, so I've got to be careful. Because I am sort of sharing personal opinion alongside
Of course, yeah,
what comes through from our work as well. But yeah, this is going to have long-term impact. So if you think about kids going to school hungry, or it's just a no-brainer, isn't it? That's going to affect them physically. There
of
are
course,
potential long-term impacts on their physical health as well as their mental well-being,
yeah,
but also on their school achievement.
yeah,
And there's some kind of good research out there that does show that poverty is a key driver behind school absences and behind poor achievement. um, and it's almost like it's um, em- embedding that class divide,
yeah,
isn't it? It's
definitely.
like, so if you're already off to a lesser starting point, you're more disadvantaged because of where you live, because of your backstory and so on. That's just going to be embedded, and you're probably never going to get out of that the way things are going, and it's really, really difficult.
Yeah, and it's really worrying because even if you look to the future and think that there could at some point be a change in government, for example, again, not to get too
Mhm.
political, but even then, it's almost like there's going to be so much damage to undo.
Yeah, and that's the thing I really struggle to wrap my head around. We've got all these amazing organisations out there that help with the absolute basics. So they help with, we've got like baby banks, and as well as food banks, like help with things like clothing and school uniforms, beds, blankets, curtains for
Yeah,
crying out loud.
yeah,
It's bonkers, for a lot of people. And we've just got this massive divide, haven't we? There are the powers that be
yeah.
don't necessarily have any lived experience.
No,
Don't Everything to them is purely anecdotal. They don't understand it, and that for me is a real issue.
I just think as well, it feels kind of like I'm living in some sort of dystopian nightmare sometimes because,
Yeah.
you'll see an advert by the government saying, here are all the places that you can go to get financial help and you don't have to struggle alone. I'm thinking, how am I
Hmm.
living in 2023 and the government of our day are having to make adverts like that even? It just boggles your mind to think it just feels like, we're going back to the 1980s.
Yeah, well, in many ways, it's worse, isn't it? I
Yeah,
remember the 80s very well, and yeah, in many ways, it feels worse,
yeah,
because yeah, and it is interesting, isn't it, that there's kind of good kind of evidence and research out there that shows, if you're already getting off to that poorer starting point, if you've come into this crisis, for example, already in debt,
yeah.
you might never get out of that debt.
No.
It's awful, really awful. Sorry to be so negative.
No. I
But
think it's difficult to be positive. You know what I mean? I mean,
it's
the fact that you're there as part of Leeds Community Foundation, that's positivity enough, I think. And it's
yeah,
about it's about as much as we're going to get at this point
and
is
I
people
think
doing great things.
Yeah, and I think for me, this is me speaking personally again as well. I think it's really important that we don't accept it. and
Yeah.
that we don't it doesn't become the norm, and we don't just lay back and take it and resign ourselves to the fact that, oh, this is the way it is now. You know, I'm
No,
always
I
gonna
agree.
be in debt. I'm always gonna be paying this much just to kind of stick the heating on, if I can stick the heating on in the first place.
Yeah.
So yeah, not encouraging a revolution or anything, but actually that's what I'm saying. we need something, you
Yeah.
know.
I feel like that as well, and I feel like you're right. We've got to keep talking about things, and we've got to keep sort of showing up the discrepancies and the
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. And you're right. We can't just lie down and take these things.
Keep shouting, keep doing whatever you can. Write to your MP, your councillors. You know, share your real kind of lived experience, your stories, and you know, really hammer home what that lived experience is, rather
Yeah.
than rather than just letting them rely on what they think it is and what they read in the papers. And yeah, really keep shouting about it. And
Completely
also,
agree.
do, you know, anyone who is struggling out there, you know, do, you know, if you can get online, that I know the council have worked really hard to kind of put together a map of warm spaces, for example, in Leeds. So,
That's right. Yeah.
you know, there are libraries and lots of other kind of community spaces where you can go and sit and have a cup of tea. And I'm sure with a lot of them as well, you can go and kind of charge your phone and access the internet and do all of those things that are quite practical as well. So yeah, do what you can in terms of getting through the day to day, but also that bigger picture.
Yeah.
We need to be working on that bigger picture, don't we? And
Yeah. I
how we
completely
address
agree.
that. Yeah.
Maria, how did you get involved in this role in the first place? Then, has your sort of career always led you in this way, or?
No. So yeah, so it's been really interesting for me. So like I come from a background of working in creative engagement. So I've worked for a lot of like arts organisations, like venues, theatres, in creative I can't even speak, in creative engagement. So working with communities and young people, creating access to arts and cultural activities.
Oh, brilliant.
Um, so that's my background, and I was working for uh, basically what's called an NPO, a national portfolio organisation, Arts Council funded, in Calderdale. And then when the pandemic hit, well, actually, there's a longer story there that I won't go into, but basically, loads of us got made redundant,
Right.
and so interesting to have that fairly recent experience of being unemployed for the first
Yeah.
time in a really long time. And yeah, I get a bit of first-hand experience of back on benefits and understanding what that's like. So I can speak personally from how impossible it is to live on
Yeah,
a
because
universal
that is a
credit.
difficult system to navigate, isn't it?
Absolute nightmare. But as I was kind of looking for work, which was obviously during pandemic, really tricky, I did kind of think maybe it's time to step aside from purely looking at that kind of more arts related work. And because one of the reasons I've always done that work is, I love the creative sector, and I think it's such a great tool for lots and lots of different things.
Yeah.
But the thing I always loved about it was working with people and working with communities and young people, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that kind of quite naturally, I think, led me to kind of looking at other work in the third sector, and happened to get this job with Leeds Community Foundation. And it's been great having my experience, because I think I've got kind of understanding of how a lot of kind of community groups and delivery works. And also I've been on that other side as somebody always applying for funding and managing projects and having to report and do all of those things. So yeah, I think it feels like quite a natural transition in a lot of ways, but I've learned a lot as well in this role.
It sounds like the perfect role for you, really.
Yeah, feeling pretty good at the moment, apart from all the obvious challenges that we've.
Yeah, of course. But at least you're part of the solution, which is also great.
Yeah, I mean, God, I mean, in an ideal world, organisations like ours that do distribute that funding, it would be about enrichment rather than basic need. You know,
Yeah,
in an ideal world, we wouldn't be funding things like food banks and, you know, winter programs that you know, circulate blankets and warm drinks to older people. Do you know what I mean? We wouldn't
yeah,
be meeting those basic needs, because those basic needs, as far as I'm concerned, should already be being met.
of course.
We would be about enrichment. We would be about, and we do that as well. You know,
Yeah.
we've got some amazing programs that we so we've got one through Leeds Civic Trust, for example, which I absolutely, you know, I'm so excited about. We've funded Jamaica Society Leeds towards their a project that they've been doing, which is absolutely amazing. That's all about platforming all sorts of voices and experiences. It's called the Out of Many Festival, and they've been doing some amazing events, and that's really exciting. We're funding. This is where I might pronounce it wrong. Apologies, but the Ahlbeit Cultural Centre, which is working with young people with Iraqi heritage to train up these young people as researchers and filmmakers, and they're going to make some films about Iraqi diaspora stories in Leeds. So
Oh, wow, that
the
sounds
things,
really fascinating.
I know. So things like that are so exciting and lovely, and also kind of give that opportunity for kind of like not unheard, but maybe less widely known kind of stories and experiences to be shared in Leeds. So dead exciting stuff like that happens as well, which is
So,
really
so it's great. It's great that you've got that to sort of balance out how difficult everything else is.
yeah, and it's just so lovely when, you know, when we get to visit these groups and when we get to kind of hear, you know, read reports and hear all these stories, you know, all the kind of wonderful work that these people do. They're amazing. The third sector's amazing.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things I've learned from making this podcast. I thought I would. I'm coming up to my 4th year in May, and I thought I would have run out of people by now. But there's just always so many great things happening in Leeds. It's one of the reasons that I just love the city so much.
There's a
Um,
lot in there.
yeah, it's fantastic, and it never ends. It's constantly evolving, and I love that.
Brilliant.
So in your spare time, Maria, you do some photography, events photography. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah. So yeah, I basically do a bit of freelance photography, and I'm one of these people who sort of came to it a bit late in my 40s. I kind of finally got to that. I've always loved photography, and I was really lucky in that I went to a really rubbish school in Lincolnshire, kind of left at 16 and had to sort of battle to get kind of further and higher education. But I had a brilliant art teacher who built a dark room. So I learned how to use a camera when I was quite young, a film camera, but just couldn't really afford it. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah, it's a very expensive hobby, isn't it?
yeah, and then, you know, then kind of got to a point in my 40s and bought my first digital camera. And yeah, just I think I'd taken a few pictures at some events, and then on the back of that got offered some work, and that sort of built. So, and it all kind of connects back to my kind of love of the arts and culture, and so I've got to kind of do photography for all sorts of brilliant events and organisations. So, like, I worked on the Yorkshire Festival, for example,
Oh,
and
wow.
done the carnival a couple of times, and Trans Pride in Leeds. Yeah, so worked on some really lovely events, and I do like that documenting side
Yeah,
of things. So I like to sort of capture things as they happen, and I like quite sort of candid, natural rather than posed photography, I guess.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so I do bits and bobs, not loads, don't make a living from it or anything, but
Yeah, but sometimes I think it's better to take the money side of things out of something that you really enjoy.
yeah,
If you
yeah,
can, I mean, I know a lot of people like to make money out of their hobbies or whatever, and I'm sure it works for some people. But I just feel it kind of takes the pressure off, and you can
yeah.
kind of enjoy the art for itself rather
Mm,
than worry about making any money out of it.
yeah, sometimes it takes the love out of it, the joy, doesn't it, when
It
it
does a little bit.
becomes pressured and
And you're also a trustee director for Outside the Box and the Party People. Can you tell me a bit about those?
yeah. So outside the box comes from the partly from the role that I mentioned before that I got made redundant from.
Yeah,
So when I was working back in Halifax, if I'm allowed to talk about Calderdale a little bit
you're
on a
allowed. Yes.
Leeds podcast. So I was working at Square Chapel in Calderdale, and one of our activities that we did was a community choir for young people and young adults who have a range of additional needs. So we've got, some of the young people have kind of physical and learning disabilities. Some have kind of neurodivergencies such as autism. Um, we've got kind of cared for young people, care leavers, lots of young people on the LGBTIQ plus rainbow. So like a really amazing mix of young people who just love kind of singing. And the choir isn't about, like, I'm doing inverted commas here, which you can't see. It isn't about ability or talent. It's just about pure enjoyment and joy and connection. And as you can imagine, when an organisation goes into administration and a big chunk of your work is with communities and young people,
Yeah,
it's kind of like, well, what about them? you
yeah,
it's like all the administration is focused on is kind of money and assets and distributing
yeah.
those and what happens next and new management and blah blah. But for us it was like, but what about our young people? What about our communities? So we were absolutely determined to keep that choir going. So we kept it going through the pandemic, online, um, completely ramshackle, but it happened. and and we just knew that when the new managers of Square Chapel said they didn't want to do any more community engagement work, which was a massive blow, um, we just said, right, well, we're setting up our own charity. And that's what we did. And
Oh,
it's been a massive piece of work. But I'm still working on it. It's still a work in progress, but I'm really proud of it. We've been going a year now. Well, we registered a year ago. Um, our choir is up and running in person again. And I was there last night actually, and it's just beautiful. It's just absolutely beautiful, and yeah, really proud of that, and really proud as well. We've got a young person on our committee who she has autism. She's just one of the most amazing creative young people I know, and she won an award last year as a young volunteer.
oh.
Really proud of her as well. That's Tills. Shout out to you, Tills. And yeah, I'm babbling now because I'm so proud of them. But the other bit,
It just sounds like a fantastic thing to be involved in, and like an antidote in a way to all of
yeah,
the depressing things that we've just been discussing.
yeah, and it's also, I guess, it's me still having that hand in the creative sector
Yeah,
alongside my day job, and the other group I'm involved with who operate in Leeds and Bradford are the Party People Project,
yeah.
and that started as a project run by Brickbox in Bradford. I don't know if you've come across them
I
before.
don't
They're
think I have. No.
they're brilliant as well, and so it was kind of a project. And during my kind of period of being unemployed and looking for jobs and stuff, I did a bit of freelance work with them during the lockdown. And Party People Project basically works with adults with kind of learning disabilities and difficulties, and adults with neurodivergences. So again, people with autism, and so on. And it's like a series of workshops where they learn how to host events.
Oh,
So they
wow.
kind of come up with their ideas and they plan them and they come up with themes and they create dance routines. They learn DJ skills and they basically host these events for everyone, but also with that kind of mindset that we know that a lot of people out there who have, need support workers, for example,
Mm-hmm.
their kind of social life ends at 9 o'clock when the support worker clocks off.
Yeah.
It's all about kind of like buying into that idea of, well, people with additional needs should be able to go out and stay up late just like everybody else.
Of course.
So it's all about that ethos, really. And they'll attend these workshops, they'll put on these events. Absolutely brilliant. We did them online. So a lot of online discos. I'm sure we all did a lot of online discos during the pandemic. I know I did. And and then now we're back in person. So we had a brilliant event at Left Bank, Leeds, towards the end of last year. Really amazing. And had a couple of events in Bradford since then as well.
Oh, wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, see what I mean? Loads of ace stuff happening out there.
Yeah, we can balance out all the bad stuff. I think there's
definitely
stay positive. And Maria, you did mention that Lincolnshire, so I'm gathering that you've not lived in Leeds all of your life.
I've lived in it most of it though, probably. I'm from Boston in Lincolnshire, near Skeg, if you don't know it.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that you've lived in Leeds long enough to.
I've lived in Leeds a long time. I first moved to Leeds it would have been the 90s. So yeah. And I've lived a bit in Bradford, I've lived a bit in Batley, but I've had a good chunk of time in Leeds. I've been where I am in Morley for well over 10 years now.
Oh, well, that means you're 100%. You're okay to answer the 3 questions. The first one being, what would you say is great about the city of Leeds?
Oh, well, predictable answer here. The amazing, different, diverse communities and all the amazing community organisations that support them.
Yes, exactly, of which you are one. And I completely agree with that. My podcast is completely made up of people just like that. And the second question is, what would you say is not so great about the city?
Well, aside from the things that we've already talked about, which, don't apply just to Leeds, buses.
Oh.
And not just the lack of or the unreliability, but there's those damn digital displays that lie to you.
Oh my goodness. I cannot tell you. I'm not the kind of person to write a complaint, but when I do write a complaint, it's to First Bus and it's about ghost buses. And they never answer the question.
What they're called?
Ghost buses, yeah. You know the ones where you stood there 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, due, then it just disappears.
Then it doesn't
don't drive
up.
past.
Yeah.
So it's not the fact that they've run out of time, they're just going back to the depot. It's not that.
Yeah.
Why have it if they don't exist?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, if you're using this technology to keep us informed, why not actually keep us informed?
Yeah. You would be, honestly, I would say the answer to that question, I've done like over 150 episodes.
Yeah.
I would say we're in the high 90s.
Oh, I know.
So yeah, buses, it's an age old.
Also, I remember when we had late buses.
When you had what?
We used to have late buses in Leeds.
Oh yeah, no.
So we used to have buses that there'd be a bus at like midnight and another one at 1 in. So you could go to things and get home. And my last bus home now is at 10:30, and I've literally like gone to the theatre and had to leave before the ending to get my last bus home.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's stupid.
Oh dear. And the third question that I ask is, if somebody had been a resident of Leeds for a very long time, would you be able to tell them about something that you would consider to be a secret place that perhaps no one will have known of?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be a secret physical place, does it?
No, it doesn't. It can be a view, a
Yeah.
walk, whatever you like.
Yeah, so my kind of like gem is Leeds Creative Time Bank. I don't
Oh,
know
I
whether.
know. I'm part of that.
Oh, are you?
I am.
Brilliant. I don't know if it's been kind of brought up before as a gem, but that's
It
my
hasn't actually. So
right.
it's great to hear someone talk about it. Yeah, tell us
Yeah.
more.
So yeah, so I mean, there's lots of things I could have talked about in terms of brilliant things in Leeds, but yeah, so Leeds Creative Time Bank, it's been going about 13 years, I think now, and it is, it's me again going on about volunteering and championing that, but it's about sharing your skills
Yeah.
in exchange for other people's skills. So, for example, I've done quite a bit of photography through the time bank, so I'll do some photography for somebody, um, and I'll get paid in hours. So if I do 6 hours, included all the editing, that goes into my little time bank pot of credits, and then I can use those hours to use somebody else's skills. So, for example, I had an exhibition in Leeds a few years ago, and I needed people to help um, invigilate the exhibition. So that's what I did. So yeah, you can donate your time, and then as a reward you get to use other people's time and skills on whatever it is you want to do, whether it's your tax return or some admin you need help with, or you might need help writing a funding application, and somebody out there would be willing to donate their time to help you with that. So yeah, big fan of the time bank.
Yeah, I am too, and I love the idea of the. It's kind of like democratizing the value of the skills that you can do, and I love the idea of that. Like you're swapping your skill for another person's skill. I just think it's just such a wonderful idea, and I've been involved in so many kind of little mini projects and things that I perhaps wouldn't have done.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's one of the really lovely benefits, isn't it? Is you get to meet all these other people and get to kind of go to things or be a part of things that you may not have even been on your radar. So yeah, it's great.
yeah. Well, I always do lots of notes, podcast notes, and in those I'll put links to everything you've talked about, and obviously to the Leeds Community Foundation, and I'll put one in for the time bank because the more people who get involved, the merrier, really. And Maria, I always ask guests if they have a Leeds-based musician or artist track that they would like to feature on their episode, and you've chosen "Stargazers Know This Stuff" by Galitza. Can you tell me a little bit about why you chose that particular track?
Oh yeah, so a number of different reasons actually. So well, first of all, the woman you'll hear singing on. Oh, sorry, I've just got a bit of an update about something. Yeah,
Don't
so
worry
the
about
woman
that.
you'll hear singing on this track is my mate Emma Adams, and she we DJ together sometimes. So and she's brilliant, and but also Galitza were around in the sort of early noughties. Great band, sort of Leeds and Bradford again, and I'm also, I mean, choosing it kind of like as a Leeds track and as sort of something that encompasses lots of good gig memories I've got in Leeds in the early noughties, which I hate the fact that the noughties is now nostalgic, but and and also I'm choosing it in dedication to Stevie Adams, who's one of the musicians in Galitza, and he sadly died almost 2 years ago, way too young of cancer, which is just heartbreaking. And he was such an asset to the Leeds music scene in the 90s and noughties. So so it's in memory of Steve as well. So yeah, Galitza, Stargazers Know This Stuff.
Yeah, it's a really great track. I love it. And what will you be doing with the rest of your day today, Maria?
I think I will most likely, I can't remember what I've got on my schedule. And I think I'm going to be looking at reports, actually. I've got a couple of funder reports that are due. But yeah, there's always loads to do.
Well, thank you so very much for coming along and speaking to me and letting us all know about Leeds Community Foundation. I wish you the best of luck in these turbulent times. And again, I'll put lots of links and podcast notes so people can get involved and find out what it is that you're up to.
Brilliant. Thanks, Hazel.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm sure you'll agree with me. Maria Spadafora is a fantastic guest, and that Leeds Community Foundation are doing really valuable and brilliant work. Do check out the podcast notes where everything that Maria and I spoke about that has a link, I will include the link. Maria wanted to use the track Stargazers Know This Stuff by Galitza, which she tells us was a Leeds band in the noughties. I don't remember them, but the track is fantastic, actually. It's got a real energy about it and kind of a bit of a punky vibe, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, go and check that out. Look after yourselves, Leeds. Look after each other, and I will speak to you soon. Bye-bye.